Okay, it's time to talk about Trump's awful presidency, part 5. And today we're going to talk about natural disasters and how he handled them during his presidency. Now, I thought I was shocked before by Trump's awfulness, but when you get to natural disasters and how he handled them, I was truly shocked compiling this about the callousness and the recklessness and the carelessness with which he treated the lives and the safety and the well-being of other Americans. He repeatedly played politics with natural disasters, played favorites with people he liked versus people he didn't like when choosing who to help, and used natural disasters as weapons when it suited him. First up, we have Hurricane Matthew, which occurred even before Trump was president in October of 2016. Matthew killed 585 deaths worldwide, including 29 in North Carolina. And the North Carolina State Climate Office estimates that it was the 5th deadliest and 4th costliest North Carolina tropical cyclone on record. So why does this matter? Well, it fell to Trump to provide disaster relief for Hurricane Matthew, and already, right at the beginning of his presidency, he played favorites. Governor Cooper requested $929 million to help with costs associated with the hurricane, but the state received only about 1% of that amount from the Trump administration. Roy Cooper, incidentally, is a Democrat, and so the prevailing view is that he just didn't want to support a Democratic state or a state that had elected a Democrat as governor who didn't support him. In the next year, September 2017, Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico, a U.S. territory, and killed nearly 3,000 people in Puerto Rico alone. From the beginning, the Trump administration seemed to think that Hurricane Maria was no big deal, or they just didn't care as much because of the fact that they were Puerto Rican. And there were many examples of corruption and inattention that were widely criticized at the time. One of the first things that happened is the United States denied a request by Puerto Rico to waive the Jones Act. The Jones Act basically says that you can only have U.S. shipping from port to port. Puerto Rico wanted that to be waived so they could get supplies and relief much more quickly. The Trump administration argued that there was no need to do that because there was enough supply anyway. But if there was enough supply anyway, why not just waive the Jones Act in the first place? Conditions ended up being pretty appalling and the response very slow. As this retrospective article points out, it took 328 days, or roughly 11 months, for the island to restore power to all the customers who lost it. Trump, of course, had his excuses for what went wrong.
This is an island surrounded by water, big water, ocean water.
But there was a lot more to the delays than that. As you might not be surprised. People were stunned when a month after Hurricane Maria, a small company with literally 2 people was granted a $300 million no-bid contract to help rebuild the electrical power grid. This company, you'll be shocked to learn, has connections to the Trump administration and the people that are in the Trump administration, and it seems like an all-out example of corruption. I won't even share the clip of Trump visiting and nonchalantly tossing paper towel rolls to struggling residents, but here's another clip that got people really upset.
Every death is a horror, but if you look at a real catastrophe like Katrina, and you look at the tremendous hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that died, and you look at what happened here with really a storm that was just totally overpowering. Nobody's ever seen anything like this. And what is your death count as of this moment? 17?
16 certified.
16 people certified.
Trump was clearly in cover your ass mode there, trying to take credit for a small amount of deaths or make it look like it was not so bad, even though we saw that 3,000 something people died during Hurricane Maria. There's so much more we could say about Hurricane Maria alone, but let's move on because there's so much to cover. And now we turn to the 2018 California wildfires, which are absolutely devastating. We've just learned quite recently that back at that time, Trump was refusing to give California wildfire aid until he was told by his aides how many people there had voted for him. He was literally going to withhold disaster assistance because he didn't think they were his people. And the aide had to show Trump that Orange County had more Trump supporters than the entire state of Iowa. Now, a lot of people probably say, oh, fake news, it's some aide who said this anonymously. He just threatened the same thing again this past week. At his weird Coachella rally where he abandoned all of his followers, he threatened to withhold aid to California and let it burn unless they follow his fanciful, made-up fire prevention plans. I already mentioned in a previous video how back in 2018 Trump did in fact say that the US or California was at fault for not raking their forests like Finland, which led the Finnish president and pretty much the entire population of Finland to be baffled and mock Donald Trump for his bizarre statement. And he really does seem to be just grasping for an excuse to withhold aid from California because they don't vote for him. He keeps coming up with any excuse he can to blame Californians for their own problems. Check this one out that you may be familiar with.
So you have millions of gallons of water pouring down from the north with the snow caps in Canada and all pouring down. And they have essentially a very large faucet. And you turn the faucet, and it takes one day to turn it. It's massive. It's as big as the wall of that building right there behind you. And you turn that, and all of that water goes aimlessly into the Pacific. And if they turned it back, all of that water would come right down here and right into Los Angeles. They wouldn't have to.
Suffice to say, there is no fucking faucet. Trump really just seems to want to punish California and doesn't want to actually address the real problems that exist due to climate change. So he comes up with these fanciful, made-up explanations of how the problem could be magically solved. Of course, that's not the only time he's made up magical ways of solving problems like fires or hurricanes. Everybody probably remembers this one. Yeah, it's been widely reported that ever since the start of his administration, Trump has suggested nuking hurricanes. Because again, he's a simple solution that doesn't work kind of guy. Now, we've also recently seen that Trump likes to blame the Biden administration and say that the Biden administration has diverted Hurricane Helene recovery money or FEMA money to illegal immigrants, though the reality is he's projecting again. When Hurricane Dorian was forming, Donald Trump moved FEMA money to border operations. Even if you believe all these reports are somehow deep state propaganda, there's one image you cannot ignore, and that's the infamous Sharpiegate image and video. This happened when Donald Trump mistakenly said that Dorian was predicted to hit Alabama, which it wasn't. Fine, a mistake. But then the Weather Service had to correct him, and then Trump had to manually fix an image to show that he'd been right all along. You've all probably seen this, but feel free to pause to take a close look at the Sharpie thing that he drew. Perhaps one of the most appalling things is what happened during COVID. I'll have more to say about that, but let me point out here that Jared Kushner, who was put in charge of COVID responses, quickly running of time here, but here's the relevant quote. Trump's politicizing of natural disasters continued to the very end of his term. In the year 2020, when Michigan suffered from catastrophic flooding, Trump threatened to cut off funding from Michigan unless they fixed their absentee ballot system to benefit him politically. And here's a relevant quote you can pause to look at. Even to the very end, his responses were appalling. Hurricane Sally hit the southeastern United States, and Florida residents had to scramble for support. Trump issued a major disaster declaration after Sally, but did not include personal assistance for people, which would actually help people fix their houses. They eventually got that assistance, but it involved a Herculean effort by elected officials and citizens to show that they needed help by sending in photographs. And I'm out of time for this video, but hopefully you can see that Trump's disaster responses were political and truly appalling and incompetent. More to come later.